Well, thank you. Thank you all for joining today. Yeah, let's start the webinar so we stay on course. Thanks for joining. Today we will speak about Catalyst. Catalyst is a framework to accelerate and heighten the potential impact of biomedical research on health technology. And more specifically, we will present you the opportunity to participate in the Catalyst Europe 2020 program. The speakers will be Dr. Martha Gray in Boston. She's the faculty director at MIT Catalyst. Here with me, we have
Hello, everyone.
Marissa Theo. She's the operation manager at Catalyst Europe. And I am Ernest Lara, the Catalyst Europe manager. First, Martha will explain the essence of Catalyst as a framework and methodology, and she will explain some examples and success cases and metrics generated during the past 8-9 years. And then Marissa and I will explain about the Catalyst Europe Consortium, about the program for 2020 and the admission process and other details. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. As we were trying, in the beginning, all the attendees as they join would have the audio muted and the video switched off. I mean, you can leave the video if the bandwidth allows for that, but we will try to have the audio muted. The webinar will be recorded and posted for future viewing. We'll see if we can record it in a way that we see Martha and the presentation. The presentation itself will run around 45 minutes, and after which we'll have 15 minutes for a Q&A. We encourage you you have a chat box there so you can write questions. We will first answer the written questions and then perhaps address some oral questions if we have covered all the written ones. So that's all for, just to start. And I think that we're ready. So Martha, all yours.
Thank you. All right. So hi, everyone. I'm glad to see so much interest in the program. I'm assuming that everyone's here because you're interested, as Ernest said, of bringing innovations to advance health. The thing I know about our past experience, and I expect is represented by all of you, is that the path that got you to where you are now and the path you have going forward can be very, very different, and you come from different perspectives. But for us, that's a real asset in bringing innovations. So one of the things I wanted to do before describing the program itself is talk a little bit about what we mean by innovation, or what we mean when we say we're trying to bring something to impact. Because that's the kind of thing that people are talking about all the time. And, you know, I saw this slide somewhere and I thought that's exactly what these programs feel like. Can you just go do something great, and then you should, if you're doing something great, then write a proposal and we'll give you funding to do that thing that we've deemed to be great. And I think the challenge is, and what's been true in my experience, is the secret to innovation is not so much giving awards and money and those kinds of things after the fact when you say, oh, this looks great, but actually taking steps to build a community that include people that are not like you, or not like any one individual, and then being part of that community that works together for the shared purpose and shared experiences to create those advances. Okay, and that's fundamentally how you drive and support and foster innovation, by a community and within each individual. So that's the kind of thing that you have to do very differently. It's not enough to just say, think out of the box. And the reason we emphasize working with people that are not like you is because that's critical to thinking differently. And thinking differently is critical to actually innovation. And the reason for this is that we all operate from this mental framework, or a mind map. And that governs how we respond and react to ideas and situations. So just to even give an example, imagine you're a clinician walking into a patient encounter. So yeah, of course you're going to bring the medical facts, but your real interaction with that patient is also informed by your prior experiences with the patient, the prior experiences with that disease, with the institution. And all of those things make up your mind map. And so the idea is that in order to really grow and do innovative things, you have to think about ways to expand your mind map, expand the kinds of domain knowledge you have, the facts that you learn along the way, but also shape and experiences that come from interacting with others, from thinking about your values. And that's what provides the context for what you do next. The mind map, as I'm implying it, I'll say it explicitly, is not something that's static. It changes all the time as you grow your experiences. So the way in which you can make yourself and the community you're in more innovative is by increasing the range of people you interact with and working together to make those happen. And consequently, and let me just say a little bit more. People talk about this all the time, that diversity matters. And they usually, what we say is, the broader your mind map, the broader and clearer your worldview is. And that's something we can easily accept, that we'll be able to see things we otherwise wouldn't. I think the hidden reality, though, is the opposite of that, and this is something I myself forget still, is that you can't see things that are outside your mindset. You don't even know you're missing it. So what this does is it really helps eliminate the huge number of blind spots that we have. So fundamentally, what we do in Catalyst is we're helping you to expand your mind map. And we do this by working together. We work with people that are not like you, or not all the same, with the shared purpose of designing and executing a research project that have the potential to advance human health. Okay, so that's our underlying philosophy. Now let me just tell you a little bit more concretely how this process works, how we deliver that philosophy. Okay, so in a broad overview, Catalyst itself has multiple phases. You're applying right now to the first phase, but I just want to make sure you have some appreciation for what we see as the sequence, because the idea is to ultimately drive towards impact. So as I'll describe in more detail, the first phase, the 6-month, the program that you're applying to now, the objective is, through a process, by the end of that period, you'll have proven that the opportunity you propose to work on is actually worth doing. Okay, so there's lots of work, more work to do than that would fill all available time. And the question we're trying to ask here is, if you do it, is it going to matter? Will people care? And again, I'll talk about more than that, but you come in as individuals and you leave phase 1 with a portfolio of projects. And phase 2 is when you actually get down to the business of doing the research. And there, the idea is, by the end of phase 2, you want to prove that that opportunity that you thought you had at the end of phase 1 is in fact realizable, that you can deliver that kind of value. And if you can, then phase 3, or venture building, it doesn't necessarily have to have a phase number, that's when you start to disseminate it, get it out into the real world. And it's only once it's really out in the real world and being used that you have that kind of impact. And honestly, that's really when you have the innovation. Okay, so the whole idea, while we're starting at the very beginning, we have an eye towards that future of how to increase the chances that you're going to have an impact in the long run. Okay, so in more detail, this is how phase 1 works. First of all, who's in the room? Okay, or at least who's a key player. So the first main, I don't know if you can see my pointer. So the core group are the fellows, the people that basically do the work. All right, and that's what we're soliciting applications for right now. They're mentored by a team of faculty. We call them faculty, but they are not necessarily all academic professors. Some of them are. Some come from the university, but some also come from medicine. Some come from business. They come from the community. Okay, and they bring multiple perspectives to the process. They mentor the process. And the third key group are our champions, said here corporate champions, but champions more generally. They're the ones that sort of say, okay, in the whole space of biomedical innovation, we want to support particular focus areas. So they invest in our programs, and they are the ones that help shape broad areas that we target. And Ernest will get to the focus areas for your program a bit later. So these are the critical things we need to get started. And this is what actually happens. So the fellows under mentorship with the faculty go through a process that engages much of the community to actually determine, to conceive of new project ideas and establish whether or not those projects are actually worth doing. Okay? So this happens through a sequence of a curriculum, if you will, that I won't go into now, but through sort of a stepwise and iterative and highly interactive approach, the cohort of fellows will develop a set of what are fundamentally research proposals. And these proposals are not yet, you don't have any data yet, but they are the things that define a project opportunity. Just to be clear about a few things, we do not expect one proposal per fellow, right? So if we have 10 fellows, we do not have 10 projects. Usually it's much less than that. For the numbers we're talking about here, we expect that there'll be about 3 or 4 proposals. There'll be 3 or 4 fellows on each proposal, and each fellow will be on 1 or 2 proposals. It's not something we mandate. It happens organically, but the main message is you'll be working in teams, the teams will develop, and it's not one person doesn't own a particular project, okay? But through that process, you get to know stakeholders and experts from around the community. We do this through meeting regularly with you, in fact, once a week. And just to give you a sense of what these meetings look like, they're basically, we ask a lot of questions of one another. The faculty and faculty mentors and the fellows meet together. And we ask things like, okay, this is your idea. Who's really going to be better off? In what way are they going to be better off? And how do you know? Now, these questions are really different than what, at least in my experience, you ask when you're doing traditional research projects. When I've been involved in traditional research projects, we'll ask, okay, what's the new knowledge we're going to gain? Can we publish it? And can we publish it in high impact journals? All of those things are actually important, but they're different questions than these more impact directed questions like who will be better off in what way and how we'll know. In fact, our supposition is if you can answer these questions, which are hard to answer, then you will get publications in high impact journals and you will gain knowledge. But the objective is to be able to show value, and through that process, you'll get the more traditional fruits of academic research. And as I said before, and multiple times, these are easy questions to ask, and they're actually really hard to answer. And most of the fellows who've been involved say this turned out to be way more challenging, but also way more enriching than they appreciated up front. And we do it really, as I said before, by building a community to work together to develop those answers. Okay, so this is a picture from one of those early meetings, and the mentors here, like I said, it's a diverse group. It includes a biotech CEO, I don't know where he is, a biotech CEO, a neurologist, a radiologist, a physicist, and the fellows themselves are equally diverse. Okay, so many people have not worked together before with such a diverse group. And so you become forced to be able to explain yourself to people who have very, very different backgrounds. And through that, we reveal misunderstandings and different opportunities. So every week during phase 1, you'll meet with the same people. Okay. So maybe just to give one more example, if you ask about, just to drive home the point, if you ask a biologist what they do, most of them will say, I study cancer. How? I'm looking at how factor Y affects, process X. Well, why is this important? Well, many people die of cancer. And the challenge that we face is, how do you actually connect those dots? In what way is the work they're doing related to people dying of cancer? Usually it's not. And so how do you identify that? On the engineering side, I'm an engineer. We love to make things better and more precise. That can be hard to do, and it might be good, but you have to really answer the question of whether or not the fact that you've made things better or made things more precise really matters, because being better or more precise isn't in and of itself valuable. So these are the kinds of things that we struggle with and work on during phase one. At the end of phase one, we have what are called validated project opportunities. And just to drill down a little more than I've done in the past, a validated project opportunity has 3 key features. It has a very well-defined need, and with evidence that if you address that need, something would be better, and that improvement is actually valuable. It matters to somebody. Secondly, that you have a solution idea that is matched to that need. It's research after all, so you don't necessarily know that your solution idea will work, but it can't be a magic wand. You can't say, I'm going to cure all of cancer, because that would require a magic wand. So it has to be very specific and matched to the need. And thirdly, you have to have sort of an idea of what the real next steps, if you go into the lab or whatever the appropriate space is to actually prove your idea, what would you do? And when all these things are in place and they're tightly coupled, then you have what we call a project opportunity. And again, as I said before, these opportunities are in the form of a proposal. So at the end of phase one, you will present and try to get through the gate a proposal. These proposals will not have any preliminary data in them that you have taken. Okay. The other thing is that just because of the nature of the community we're trying to build, and because of our champions and funders, any proposal, any project opportunity that's making it through the gate will also have to engage multiple stakeholders. It will require academic research. This isn't to say that research is the only way to do this, but that's the focus of here. We're trying to do something that really makes sense in the academy. You want to have some idea that there's a potential for it to be funded, because without funding, you can't prove it. And we're looking for things that'll have proof of principle in sort of the few years category, not the 50-year category. Okay. So to just kind of take a step back and talk about what kind of makes us different than the classical kinds of research generation that you may have been involved in. Probably the most important thing to just keep in the front of your mind is, by defining research projects this way, you're not constrained by the expertise of one individual lab or existing program. Okay, most people who join academic research labs are intrinsically constrained to the topic area and the funding that are associated with that particular lab. This flips it. So this gives you an opportunity to kind of look at specialties and technologies in ways that make them well matched or optimized. The other thing is, because we have a group with such diverse backgrounds, that, as I said before, that has contributed materially to finding very novel ways to approach problems. As I'll get to with an example later, these project ideas are not baked in at the very beginning. They pivot, they change dramatically throughout the course of the 6 months. Finally, this is, in general, our follow-on funding that we try to get so that you can execute has to be of the sort that does not require that you've already proven that you can do it, which we can talk about later. Okay, so as I said, the program you're applying to, or those of you that are applying, is phase one, getting you to the project opportunity. But the emphasis and our mindset is that we fully expect you to go on to phase 2. And so just so you understand what happens when you go on to the execution, the very first thing that happens is you need to get both funding for the project, which can come from our champions, and you recruit a team. So this is the point at which people who may be currently students, for example, that are as fellows, they recruit the PIs, the people with the lab and the expertise that allow you to execute on those projects. Very often, these are people that you would have met and encountered and talked to during phase 1. But it's at this point that you cement the relationship and build your team, okay? Once you've built your team and you're executing, then the objective is to get to the point where you can prove that your idea works. The way we do this is we again, the people involved are the fellows. Now they're within their project teams. Faculty are divided into working group teams. So every project will have whatever fellows are on it, will have a subset of the faculty they worked with in phase 1, possibly other faculty mentors, and then there'll be the collaborators or the principal investigators. And this group meets bi-weekly. The thing that differentiates that from traditional execution is the existence of this faculty mentoring team, who may not be part of the project itself on a day-to-day basis. But again, what they do is they help the team make strategic decisions so that you can get to that proof of concept point as quickly as possible, as de-risked as possible. So, why have people invested in us, including why has the EU and GE spent money? It's because this project this approach that I've just described works. That for roughly the same investment in research as traditionally is made, you get a much bigger return on that investment. That's been our experience. So I'm going to talk about some results from cohorts of faculty or cohorts of fellows that were recruited during 2011 to 2014, because those are the ones where the projects have had at least 2 years of research. There was a gap the last time we recruited in 2018 for a 2019 cohort, and they've just started their phase 2 work a couple months ago. So these are from a little while back, but let me share with you what happened. So there were 16 projects that emerged from 4 cohorts that collectively involved 34 fellows. There were about 50 mentors over the course of that, and about 180 participants, and that includes collaborators, students that join the teams afterwards, just to give you a sense of scale. So though you start with a small number of Catalyst fellows, the number of people that actually get involved in phase 2 grows. So anyways, we had 16 projects. These were all very, very different kinds of projects. All were medical, but they were diverse in terms of technology and medical domain, and actually time to translation. And this is a small subset of all the things that people started to explore. Of those 16, 13 got follow-on funding independent of what happened with Catalyst. Of those, 6 have actually translated to commercial operations, 2 to an existing company, and 6 to funded startups. And I just point out right now that the goal is not to form companies. The goal was not directly to commercialize. The goal was to do something that would ultimately impact human health. But what we came to notice is that it was generating IP, and that IP was attracting licensing interests. And so this is one measure that's tangible to show that these ideas have potential and people are willing to invest in them. Just to put these numbers in context, we've seen a 50% translation rate. Compared to MIT, which is considered a reference institution, it's about 15% of projects, even science and engineering projects, that actually find themselves translated. So this is, as you might imagine, gotten the attention internally at MIT. I would want to add here that the notion, it's not that people in Catalyst are somehow, 4 or 5 times smarter than the rest of MIT. It's really that the process has accelerated the innovation. It helps prevent people from taking too long going in directions that are not going to move the work forward. Okay, and you may all have had experiences where you thought, oh, why was I spending so much time doing that? I should have been doing this other thing. So by having multiple people involved, that helps a lot. Okay. The other thing I'd say is everybody involved, whether you are a fellow or a faculty or involved, it really has changed the trajectory of research laboratories and individuals. And I can expand on that if anybody's interested in understanding that a bit more. Now, to give you some real concrete examples of I'm going to just give you 3 projects out of those 16. This one, I'll introduce you to Plenoptica. It used to be known as Team Eye, and their idea was to provide eyeglass prescriptions at the click of a button in settings where there are few ophthalmologists. And it turns out the huge problem of uncorrected vision is a consequence of inadequate access to prescriptions. They have easy access to glasses. So this project began in 2012, was commercialized in 2015, and now they're making product. And first in India was their where they got their foothold, and now they're coming to Western countries. Another project, again, to show some of the differences, this is Meet Team Luco, and their idea was to develop a non-invasive white blood cell count from images of blood flow through the nail fold capillaries. So if you can see the video, you can see these gaps these are videos of vessels in the nail fold, and you can see gaps. And their idea was that this would be counting those in a careful way would tell you whether or not how many white cells they had. And their first use case was to signal severe neutropenia in patients undergoing chemotherapy, because severe neutropenia puts you at great risk for infection and all kinds of downstream problems. They, a year ago, they created a startup and got funding from the US Small Business Administration. And the third example is Team NeuroQWERTY, and they provide motor function assessment for people with Parkinson's. And they do this by capturing subtle timing information that's contained in when you press on a keyboard. Their initial use model was for clinical trials of new Parkinson's disease drugs, because it's able to provide a semi-continuous measurement. And this means the patients can avoid going to a movement disorder specialist in the clinic. And they're starting, it was licensed in 2018 by a startup company. And they're thinking about using it in screening and other forms of neurodegenerative diseases. Okay, so all 3 of the teams that I've mentioned are actually international. They're still working. They're no longer in the Catalyst program. They're still working. They're international. They're people from Europe, Asia, and the US. That covers most of them. And the other thing to say is all of these got to this point by overcoming really sophisticated technical challenges. So they have a portfolio of research publications that got them to the point where this was something that could be translated out of the academy. And finally, to go back to my point about things changing a lot, if we don't have good data on everybody, we didn't record everything, but Team NeuroQWERTY, the Parkinson's disease typing, started out with a question about radiology errors. That was what the team really wanted to look at. And they had some idea of using eye movements to do it. They couldn't get much traction for a variety of reasons on that. So then they said, well, what about doing this for air traffic controllers? And they explored that for a while, went back to radiology errors. And they said, well, forget the eye movements. Let's think about typing speed. And then, well, what about if we're typing? What about fine motor? And then they got to typing patterns. Oops. And then they got to NeuroQWERTY. So over the course of 6 months, there were threads that you could follow, but there was nothing in the first month or two of Catalyst that would have predicted the project that came out the other end. So while we can talk about the end, this iteration and really exploring different avenues is what helps ultimately lead to the compelling new projects. So with that, I think I will turn it over to Ernest and Merced. I'm stopping share. And while you're taking control, I'd say I have every confidence that our implementation in Europe, which is based on the implementation we have in Boston, based on an adapted to the European context, I have every confidence that you'll see the same kind of results. Okay, Ernest and Merced.
Okay.
All right. Do you see my screen now? And our video? Before you mute yourself, just to check that you're seeing my screen. I'll see some chat here. Yep. All right, let's start. Okay, thank you, Martha. Let's explain a little bit more about Catalyst Europe. So Catalyst Europe is a network of partners of universities and hospitals and companies that implement the Catalyst methodology in Europe. We will run a program on 2020, which will follow the same framework that Martha explained, the phase 1 part. The program belongs to the portfolio of programs of EIT Health Campus Pillar. In fact, a grant from EIT Health catalyzed the possibility to have Catalyst in Europe. And I will not mention perhaps all of the partners here. You can check it in the website. Perhaps a special mention to GE Healthcare, because they play a very important role. The role of being the corporate champion for this cohort, as Martha explained, the role of the champion in a cohort during the Catalyst framework and methodology. And also say that you could take a look at these partners in the following way, which are spread all over 3 different locations, apart from, of course, Boston with MIT. Where are the places where activities will run and that these locations will host the activities of the program? In Madrid, we call them Catalyst hubs. In Madrid, in Debrecen, and Erlangen. All of them are led by one university in each location. Frederick Alexander University in Erlangen in Germany, Universidad Politécnica de Madrid in Madrid in Spain, and University of Debrecen in Debrecen, Hungary. I will suggest that perhaps if you're interested in applying, that you take a look. I will not cover them now because it will take some time, but there is an explanation of these focus areas. The cohort in 2020 will focus on these domains for innovation that will sort of guide the process and guide the innovation process, which are these 3, from data to clinical knowledge, access to healthcare, and healthcare management. They are pretty broad. In fact, they are very broad, and they can be applied in multiple therapeutic and clinical areas, but still they will provide some guidance for the innovation process. Who can apply to Catalyst Europe 2020? Individuals living in Europe from any European region, not limited to those locations that I mentioned, from all over Europe. With work permit or study visa in Europe, with experience in any domain area linked to health technology, life sciences, engineering, biomedical engineering, data science, artificial intelligence, medical imaging, etc. Any clinical domain, if you come from the clinical side, if you're a medical doctor. And then traditionally, what we will see is a strong presence of postdocs, PhD students, and clinicians, since they are the one interested normally, as Martha painted the whole process in conducting the actual execution of research in phase 2, right? But one question that we have a lot of times is, if I'm not a postdoc, PhD, or clinician, can I apply? And the answer is yes. If you are a nurse, if you are, for instance, an engineer working in an R&D department in a medical device company, if you have finished your MBA, yes, you can apply, and your application will be, of course, considered, because you have to have into account that there is a selection committee that the objective is to select the best possible innovation cohort, right? The most successful one. And we know that it's important. Diversity, like Martha said, is a very important element. So decisions will be made holistically, and admission of a specific fellow will be taking into account by considering the contribution of this fellow to the cohort. Okay, so in short, if you think that you can bring value to a cohort and you're motivated by the possibility of creating an impact in healthcare, don't hesitate to apply. The only thing to consider, though, is that you need to be, of course, interested in research in a phase 2. In other words, like Martha said, the process will not expect the creation of a startup right away, but going through this execution of research and perhaps license or create a startup after that. Some tips or things to have into account if you're considering to apply is that during the application, you make sure that you explain how you can bring value to an innovation cohort, what your experience, what your differentiating points, that your motivation and interest about the focus areas that I mentioned, that you're motivated by the fact of learning, strategies for research that lead to impact, and learn about the methodology, that you work well in teams, that you have an open mindset, that you are willing to not have the truth, but discover the truth and validate the truth, and important that you can devote the time to the process.
Okay. In terms of how the program is structured, as you've probably seen on the website, so the regular format are weekly sessions, which will happen each Tuesday from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Central European Time. Those sessions will happen simultaneously in the 3 hubs in Debrecen, Erlangen, in Madrid. The locations will be in the universities of these hubs, as Ernest mentioned. So University of Debrecen for Debrecen, FAU for Erlangen, and UPM for Madrid. There will be 3 fellows per hub and in person, and there will be faculty also joining the fellows in the hub. So those sessions you will be required to be attending in person, which means that if you're living outside those hubs, you will need to travel each week to your assigned hub to attend these sessions. As talked, this is a very learn by doing process. So most of the sessions, or all of them actually, will be a small lecture, and then some time to work in your teams and get mentoring from faculty. So in addition to the weekly sessions, there will be several trips planned through the program, 1 clinical immersion and 4 intensifications. The clinical immersion will happen in Madrid and will last 3 weeks. This is the longest one. And the objective will be to do several rotations within the hospital of Hospital Clínico San Carlos. And there you will form small groups and do these rotations to observe the daily activities of clinicians, nurses, and other people involved with the hospital, and start identifying hunches and nucleation points to continue through the program with validating and gathering information for the needs. After that, there will be these 4 intensifications, 2 in Boston, 1 in Erlangen, and the final one in Debrecen. So it says 1 week, but actually most probably will be 4 days. So you can manage your travels and balance these trips with your regular life. The objective of the intensifications, there are several, but I will just point a few of them. So one of them is connect in person with the other fellows from the other hubs and faculty from other regions. So you have the opportunity to build your network and expand it. You will also have the opportunity to interview stakeholders from other regions. So you will get the perspective from different people in different regions, and you will continue interviewing to gather information and validate your needs or solutions depending on the stage you are. As part of the intensifications, there will be also some workshops, and you will present the work you'll have done so far in front of independent advisory panels, who will be actually people providing more mentoring advice in addition to the faculty. There's one particular point that I wanted to highlight for the first intensification in Boston. Currently in Boston, they are running the Catalyst program. There's an innovation cohort running right now. So on June 22nd, they will do their final presentation. So during this first intensification trip, you will join these final presentations, and you will see which is the result, which are those project proposals that you will need to end up having at the end of the program. So this will be a great opportunity also to share experiences with them and meet people there. Okay, so in terms of the workload and dedication that you will be required, so for the regular weeks, you can expect around 15 hours per week. That includes the Tuesday sessions in person, and then the rest is flexible time for you for personal work, teamwork, interviews that you would like to do, or actually you will have to do, and also the midweek follow-ups with faculty. There's an exception for the Debrecen hub, which you will be required to be an equivalent of 2 days per week in the University of Debrecen. This is flexible, meaning that you can decide if you want to stay 2 full days there or the afternoons, wherever is more convenient for you. And the other dedication required is the trips. Obviously, you will need to travel, and for those moments, you will dedicate most of your time for this. It will be on site, meaning that you will be required to be there during the weekdays. So the holidays, sorry, the weekends are for you, so you can take them as holidays. So, okay, so then remuneration. All the fellows will receive an economic compensation. So we recommend you to check the terms and conditions to see the specific details for your hub or the hub you will be assigned to. It will be basically a stipend or scholarship given by one of the universities representing each hub. So FAU, UPM, or UNITED. One comment here is that if you are formally employed by one of those universities, and by formally employed, it's not studying, but having a contractual relationship for work, then the process might be slightly different. So when the time arrives, we will connect you with the hub coordinator to assess your specific case. And then there's also a budget for travel expenses. Those travel expenses will cover the clinical immersion and the 4 intensifications, the 2 in Boston, Erlangen, and Debrecen. In the case that you're living outside one of the hubs, these travel expenses of you traveling to the hub every week are not included, but we are planning to give a small compensation for those cases. It may happen that it won't cover all the costs, but we'll try to do our best when we have all the people selected. So we will assess those cases. Okay, so finally, the application process. So the first and most important deadline is February 14th. This is the deadline for you to submit your application. There's an online form that you can find on the website. It's pretty easy. You'll see it's just attaching your CV and answering a few questions related to the topics that Ernest mentioned before to understand a bit more about you. And then there are 2 key considerations that we wanted to highlight. One is the letter of support, and the second is the compatibility with your current activity. So for the first one, letter of support, if you are working full-time or you will need to reduce a percentage of your time to participate in Catalyst Europe, we'll ask you to send us and attach along with your application a letter of support from your supervisor. So we're aware that your supervisor knows this about this program and agrees that you have this reduction of time. For the compatibility, we just recommend you that you check if you have any kind of incompatibility with your current work, meaning some kind of exclusivity clause or something. So before applying, yeah, we recommend that you check these particular issues. If you have any problem or any question related to that, just write to us and we will be happy to support you on that. Okay, so after the online application, which closes February 14th, there will be the pre-selection announcement on March 5. These pre-selected candidates will be invited to the interviews day in Madrid on March 24th for some group activities and interviews. And after that, on March 31st, we'll select the fellows and we'll announce these fellows for the 2020 cohort. That means that during April, we'll work on all the enrollment processes and contracts.
Okay, I will continue just with a couple or three more comments, moving quickly to the end of the presentation, just to see that if there is any faculty, PI, or manager in research centers or hospitals, universities, and you're considering, you're interested in having a researcher, a clinician, a PhD student from your organization involved in this process. Just a couple of messages on what we see that are the values for your organizations. Mainly to say that if the Catalyst objective is to optimize science translation, it makes sense that the participant, of course, transfer these learnings to his or her current organization through their day-to-day activity, and so maintain this bond is important. And we see that there are three main value drivers here. First, the possibility to generate new projects, as Martha explained, we would generate new projects, and the fellows, we would expect that the fellows include in this plan for research, for the phase to the actual research execution, your organizations in a consortium to execute the actual research. Then the expanding the global network, right? The participant will have the opportunity to develop close relationships with GE Healthcare, with hospitals, with other companies, with MIT, other stakeholders in Boston, and EIT Health Network, right? Because they will be, after the program, there will be an alumni of the program that belongs to EIT Health Network, a network which is a very powerful network for healthcare innovation. And this is also a valuable asset for the organization. And last but not least, all the methods that the fellow will learn, mainly the ability to design and execute a strategy for research that leads to actual impact, and develop skills in opportunity validation, and train a needs-driven innovation mindset. I will perhaps, we had three or four frequently asked questions. I will perhaps jump to the two most important ones because two of them are sort of answered, and then open it to Q&A. Question, one of them would be, these are questions that people usually ask: who owns the intellectual property of the project opportunities generated during the program? The answer would be that we don't expect, now that you know more about the program, you will understand that we don't expect intellectual property to be generated during phase one, during the program, because it's, as Martha explained, identifying and validating unmet needs, proposing solutions, generating a project, and planning the research. Intellectual property would be generated in a phase two in the actual execution of the research. If for any reason any IP would be generated during phase one, the intellectual property would be owned by the participant or her organization, if there are any policies between them that confers right to their organization. And perhaps this has been already answered. I will answer this one and then open it to Q&A. Do I need to leave my organization or reduce my working hours to participate in the program? As I mentioned, the bond with if you are now working for a research center, hospital, etc., if you're, of course, unemployed, you still can apply to the program, please do. But if you are working for a research group, hospital, etc., please don't leave your organization. It's important that you maintain and you capitalize what you're learning through your day-to-day activity, and reduce the working hours. Well, it depends. there is an expectation. I want to mention there is an expectation that you will generate value in the process, right? This is, by the way, why there is a compensation, economic compensation, right? And by generating actual projects that will bring societal value. So it's important that you can devote the time to the process. In other words, it's not this, if someone applies by saying, I'm currently committed to a 40-hour per week activity and I will do this in the evenings. It's not the same thing. Like if another person that has also a 40-hour time commitment comes and with a letter of support from the organization saying, my organization supports me in reducing, I don't know, from 40 to 30 hours per week or 25, I don't know, to be able to dedicate the time to this process of catalyst. It's not, and this is another element that, of course, one of the different elements that we'll be taking into account during the admissions to see that you can actually dedicate the time to the process. So I will think that we will leave it here, right, for the explanations. I don't know, it took longer than we expected, sorry for that, but just before, while I say one last comment, I would encourage you to type questions if you have in the chat, and just to say in the meantime that anytime that you have a question, you can write here to this email to Merced. She will channel the questions and perhaps she will answer. I will answer. The coordinators in the hubs will answer. Yeah. And we are also open and very happy to jump into Skype calls if you need to have a conversation to treat your specific case, either if you are a candidate or you are a manager, PI, and you're interested in enrolling one of your team members in the program. And you have, of course, more information in the catalysteurope.eu website and in the terms and conditions that you can find there. Okay, questions.
So we have a first one from Claudia saying, can unemployed or freelance people apply, or is it necessary to be working in a lab/company? You can apply. It doesn't matter if you are unemployed or freelancer. So you are very welcome to apply to the Catalyst Europe program in any working situation you are.
Expenses for the intensification weeks provided by the organization. By the organization, I perhaps will understand that you mean by your organization. Well, the answer is the program, our program provides a budget for you to travel to Madrid, to Boston, to Debrecen, to Erlangen. So the travel expenses, there is a limited budget that you would have to manage to be able to travel to those locations. But we provide this budget as well as we provide an economic compensation for the value generated and the time dedicated for the fellows. By the way, if any of our answers are not answered, again, insist in this email. Okay?
Yeah. I will add, because I didn't mention before, there for the interviews day for the pre-selected candidates, for the ones who live outside of Madrid and need to take a flight or train to attend the interviews, these costs are also covered. So again, details in the terms and conditions, but so you know that. Then there is two similar questions and actually interesting ones.
Please, Martha, jump into anything that you want to add, for instance, related with the phase 2 things.
So the question is, phase 2 will also be deployed through campus EIT Health, and all the fellows from phase 1 will be part of 2?
Related with the first part of the question, through EIT Health, we will run, and we are applying now for a new grant for 2021 for phase 1. So we are planning to do phase 1 after phase 1, initiating new cohorts within the framework of EIT Health. The mechanisms through which a fellow transitions from phase 1 to phase 2 is directly connected to the funds that will pay phase 2. EIT Health does not provide funds for phase 2. These funds will come either through one of our champions that participates in any of the Catalyst cohorts and in the ecosystem, either because we may secure funds and then through a selection committee admit projects that transition from phase 2 to from phase 1 to phase 2 with secure funds. This may happen, of course not secured today, or because the group of fellows get together and raise competitive funds.
So actually, if all fellows from phase 1 will be part of phase 2, not necessarily. So there might be fellows from phase 1 that just decide to opt out of the project and maybe join another one, or maybe decide that this is not for them. So that links to the second question, which is very relevant, very similar, which is it mandatory to participate in the second phase of the program? The answer is no. So you can just be part of phase 1 and then decide if you want to continue to phase 2.
We would initially, at least as an expectation at the very beginning, we would expect people that is hungry to generate this, has hunger to generate these projects, and really wants to participate in phase 2, right? This is the region. But during the process, they may realize that they don't have an opportunity to go to phase 2, or they don't want to do it, etc. And the experience, this perhaps Martha can build on that, but the experience of the past cohorts and past groups demonstrate that the ones that don't still develop very successful, develop very interesting changes in their careers given the training.
Okay, so then there's another question, and maybe Martha, you can help here, which says, which is the main skill that you're looking for? Scientific quality, innovation possibilities, the best idea among all the applicants?
So, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's definitely not the latter, not the best idea among the applicants. We are not looking for you to come in with a preformed idea. I mean, of course, you come in with lots of ideas. That's natural, but we are not looking for that. We generally expect people to have some expertise in some domain area, because as part of the program, it's not an undergraduate program. We're not teaching you fundamentals. We want you to be far enough along so that you can learn things on your own. So we look for that, which we can figure out a lot of that from your application itself. I think on top of that, we're looking for people with the resilience and capacity to work on teams and what is sometimes an open-ended, sometimes frustrating process of getting something that meets muster. So, and if you're somebody who prefers to work alone, to not talk to anybody until you know you're right, then this program's going to drive you crazy. Okay. But if you found you've learned from people in the past and you're open to that idea, then this would be perfect. So we try to sort out those kinds of other dimensions of people's skill set and aptitude.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, no, actually the following question is related to that, which it says, how are the topics of the projects decided?
So yeah. within the focus, so the fact, I'll tell you what does not happen is no faculty is going to tell you should work on something, right? So through a combination of things that you find interesting, and it's important to follow your gut, right? If you're not interested in something, it doesn't matter if it's important, right? You have to care yourself. So it's a combination of exploring things and finding something that's interesting and attractive that then to you, and that fits into those very broad focus areas. If it's way outside a focus area, it's going to be harder to imagine that we've had ways to get funding for it and so forth. But it's entirely driven by you. This is very much empowers the fellows to own the process.
Good.
Next question is English the official language in the cohort? Yes. So everything happens in English.
The question is, are these trips obligatory, the intensifications? The answer is also yes. Again, we're flexible people. We may be flexible in different things related with, I don't know, you cannot attend one session, but we should plan on, I mean, there is the minimum amount of personal relationship required to develop this sort of innovation processes, right? And precisely we plan these trips to generate the possibility to give the opportunity to the different fellows to be in one room and work together. So yeah, it is obligatory, yeah. Okay, so perhaps, I don't know, we can leave it here. All right. Well, thank you guys.
It'll change your life. It'll change your life. That's been my experience.
Will change your life. That's the last. Keep that in mind.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.